Welcome to the Church Communications Podcast. We want to help you become a church communications expert. We understand it's a challenging and ever-changing role because we worked in the church too, which is why we built a community of over 30,000 church leaders that are ready to support and cheer you on. Your hosts for the show are Katie Allred, Kenny Jahng, with special guest host from the church communications team. They're here to help you and equip you to better reach your community. We'll talk shop with practitioners, professionals, and communications experts about what's working, what's not, and what's next.
Hey everyone, we're so glad to have you joining us for this very special episode of the Church Communications Podcast. My name is Abby McCulley, and today I am joined by Kristie. Kristie, how are you today?
I'm great. How are you? Thanks for having me.
I'm awesome. We're so glad to have you on with us. Kristie is on the Events and Experiences team at Compassion International, who we are so excited to be partnering with for our upcoming She Leads Church event. Kristie, again, thank you so much for being here. We have loved working with you and your entire team during this event.
Oh, thanks for having us. We feel the same way about you and this incredible community.
Fantastic. Well, first, we want to kind of get to know you a little bit. We want to hear a little bit about you, about your journey, what it's like working at Compassion, some of the ways that we've been able to partner together. So let's just start with you. Just tell me a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I grew up in Los Angeles, California, so in a town that's on the backside of the Hollywood sign, so not very glamorous, but known, Burbank, California. And I just grew up in, it's kind of a strange reality to grow up in, but in the midst of that, came to know Jesus through my local church and through the children's and family ministry director that just really poured into me and ended up praying for me every single day until she passed away at about 93, but she committed to pray for me. So pretty amazing.
That's incredible. What an amazing story.
Yeah. And so grew up in the church and then ended up really feeling called to ministry and became a children's and family director myself in several local churches within Los Angeles and really loved that. And through that I went to school to be a teacher. And so I ended up in ministry kind of as a teacher and wrote a curriculum for kids in the church that would be multisensory and connected. And now we've brought that to families at home so that they can spiritually disciple their children at home and called We're Vibrant Kids. So that's one of the things that I do. And just really passionate about kids knowing they're loved and seen and just having that rock solid foundation that Jesus is with them in everything in their lives. And really thinking about how kids, I know that I grew up with a lot of challenges in the environment I was growing up in. And so knowing that Jesus was with me made all the difference. And I want kids to have that too.
Absolutely. So you are close to the hearts of so many of our listeners who are working in the church. They are church communicators.
Yeah.
You know what it's like. You've been in the trenches. You've lived through that. So that's fantastic.
Yeah, I should probably also mention I am married to my husband, David, and we live out here still in LA County and have a Cocker Spaniel that we treat like a human being. So, yeah, so that's me now. It's great.
Love that. That's amazing. Okay. So, what about your role now? You work at Compassion, which I'm sure most of our listeners are very familiar with Compassion and the work that you do. But just tell us a little bit about maybe what Compassion is for anyone listening who isn't aware, and then what you get to do at Compassion.
Yeah. Compassion exists to release children from poverty in Jesus' name. That's our mission statement. I love thinking about it as a child protection and child development agency that lives all over the world and ministers to the kids that have the least on this planet. And so we do that by partnering with the local church and forming those partnerships so we can build child development centers and empower the local church to be the church. And it is powerful to see this excellence spread across the world and really release a whole generation out of poverty. And so, the opposite of poverty isn't wealth necessarily, but enough. And I've really learned that what Compassion does is restore hope to generations so that they can dream and see a different future than maybe their parents have had, or maybe many generations have lived. So yeah, we do that. And we have a holistic child development model that we invest in kids and families. And it's so good that I don't even know how to begin talking about it, because I've seen it with my own eyes. And it's just, I often am like, oh my gosh, if people really knew how incredible this is, everyone would want to sponsor 10 kids, you know? It's just it's giving us access to actually empower the global church and be with the people Jesus cares most about, you know, or talked most about us, like focusing our heart on. So I am currently on the, what were you going to say? Sorry.
No, yeah. Yes. Keep going. That's just amazing. This is just incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm on the events and experience team right now, and we support many of the larger stage events that come from the organization. And I personally am working on strategic communication and program planning to make sure that Compassion's story is told in a way that's accurate and excellent and inspires people to be a part of this movement, that the kingdom movement that Compassion is. So
we love that. We know how important storytelling is in communication.
Yes.
So again, all of our community, all of our listeners, they are all about that. You sound like such an expert in this area. So that sounds like an amazing job, an amazing career. And like you said, to be inspired every day, you're so close to it. You get to see that it is real, because I know a lot of times, especially if you've been in the church world or if you've been exposed to like the nonprofit space, you hear about so many different organizations and so many different amazing things that you can partner with. And me personally, I'm like, okay, well, I can't help everyone. I can't donate to every organization. Which one can I get involved with? And everything that I've seen from Compassion truly is incredible and truly is worth any investment that anyone has ever made into it.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious to know, especially since you have some expertise in communications, I'm wondering if you have noticed like what things that you have seen change maybe throughout your career in this space, because you have worked in the church world as well. But specifically in the last 2 years, obviously, everything has been different. So I'm just like curious what your perspective is on that.
Yeah. Changing with communication, or with just in general. Yeah. The way we communicate. Yeah.
Yes, especially because I'm sure that you guys are doing a lot more stuff digitally than you were,
Definitely.
pre-COVID.
Yeah, we've all been through that, right? Here we are having a conversation across a digital platform, and we're very comfortable with that now. So I think that it's really about finding unique ways to connect and be human with each other. And we've all seen this change, right? Where we experienced in-person time and then would supplement with maybe phone calls or Zoom calls or things like that. But communicating, and I was a speaker full-time on the road for about 4 years. And so I was communicating in churches and events and all of that, usually about 50 to 60 times a year. And so I had, but none of those were virtual. In fact, I remember one time thinking, oh, I wonder if I could stay home more if I spoke on Zoom. How would we do that? How would we do that at an event? Would the people sit and watch the screen, or how would that be interactive? I mean, truly. So it's really funny to see how fast we've accelerated to that place. But then I think, initially, so I started a masterclass series for a lot of our Christian communicators at Compassion that were our partners that had lost all their work over the quick shutdown. And in that space, they were these masterclass workshops. Everyone was ready for it. I think what we've seen happen is people have a little Zoom fatigue, right? Not everybody wants to get on everybody's workshop. Mm-hmm. And so really attuning ourselves to our audience to know, what do they need right now? And truly listening and being empathetic, because I have experienced, and I don't know if you share this, but I think the need continues to shift very rapidly. So the global kind of feeling of the experience right now, we're experiencing the threat of war and all of these things. So it's our needs change as the trauma in the world around us shapes our need. And so making sure that we're maybe having some long-term planning, but then we're also sensitive to pivot and provide this space to have relevant short-term planning so that we're really connecting, not just communicating. I think it's John Maxwell that says, many communicate, few connect, and so it's like really making sure we're on the same page. So yeah, lots of change, obviously, with moving to the digital, and we went through canceling all kinds of in-person events. Now I feel like they're flooding back. And so everyone's like, oh, and I think globally, I get a sense people are tired, and yet we're having to perform on a level that's, I think it's constantly changing.
It definitely is. And it's almost like everyone is finally comfortable with, okay, we all moved online. We all know how to do this now. We all have our process.
Yeah.
Now everyone's tired of it. Like, sorry, like you said, no one wants to get on every single workshop or join every single live event. So it is, I think, about being more intentional and more specific. And like you said, really nailing down who you're targeting, who you're trying to provide content or provide, resources to, and what they really want and need. So I think that's a very, very good point.
Yeah. So that it's not clutter, but it's kind and caring to their need.
Yes.
That makes all the difference.
Yes. We've been talking about that a lot. I've been having some different conversations with people, and it's like, we kind of got to this point, we're pushing out so much content. It almost becomes just for the sake, we're only doing things for the sake of content, which feels wrong. Like, we want to actually provide value to people, provide helpful resources to people. And so what does that look like now? Because people I get Zoom fatigue. I'm like, I don't even want to look at my phone or turn on the TV at night because I've been staring at a screen all day. Yeah. So definitely. I'm also curious if you have any specific stories. So you're at Compassion, all about storytelling. That's obviously a major part of your job. I'm wondering if you have a specific story of someone, a group of people who have been directly impacted by Compassion, either, whether that's someone you've interacted here with at your job or someone who is one of the sponsored children, or I'm sure you have a million stories.
I do. My heart's so full of stories of impact. And honestly, I came to Compassion burnt out and tired from church work, to be honest, and some of the pain I had experienced through working at church, and really was in need to connect to my first love again, and to remember why I got into ministry in the first place. Why, and I say got into ministry, I hate that phrase, honestly, because we're all in ministry as followers of Jesus, but really dedicating my whole life, all my time, my vocation to the service of Jesus. Like, I guess we could dissect that too, but the point is,
that's a whole conversation.
That's a whole conversation. Exactly. My point is, I was in need of remembering why the church was good. And so I remember being at the back of this church, the small rural church in Guatemala, and I had brought some guests, and they were all there and sitting up in the rows of plastic chairs. And sometimes I'd get everybody settled, and I kind of take a little walk and just connect with the Lord. And these kids were all lined up in the front, dressed in like, I would say a version of a tuxedo in Guatemala, right? Proud. And I had seen their homes, so I knew what it took for them to get and look so polished and so up there with excellence. And there before them were these rows of marimbas. Now, do you know what a marimba is? It looks like a xylophone, but it's made of wood. And then it's either a mallet that's wrapped in yarn, or they're rubber mallets, and they make this kind of hollow. It's not hollow. It's just this resonant wood, beautiful sound. You might remember if you think of it, like you've heard it, but so they're just, probably 12 or 15 marimbas up in front of the stage. And I'm in the back, and I all of a sudden just start to weep as they play Majesty, church where I had grown up singing Majesty. And it reminded me of this purity of heart that Matthew 5:8 says, that blessed are the pure at heart, for they will see God. And I think that often we can get so mired in the scandals of the church, or the frustrations, or all these things. And it's like, we have to keep a purity of heart in connection with Jesus. So that's the gift that I've been given. I feel like that the Lord has given me through our brothers and sisters who happen to live in poverty, is that they've really restored in me, I guess you could say, restored in me the joy of my salvation, like the purity of heart, that like following Jesus is a daily act of surrender. And so, yeah, I think of that moment, and then it leads me to this little moment. Talk about one child. As mama, right before COVID shut everything down, I got to go to Nicaragua, and I stood in the smallest house I've ever stood in on this planet. And I've stood in a lot of small houses. And it was just me and her. It was a staff trip. And so we got a sense that something was off a little bit. She's probably 21. And in Spanish, I have very, very limited Spanish, but we tried back and forth, and interpreter was there to help. And she said, "Do you think my son is sick?" And I put my hand on her little 1-year-old baby boy laying on this little tiny bed, and he was burning up. And my first thought was, can she get to a doctor? Oh gosh, what do I say that isn't insensitive to her? And she turned to me, 21-year-old mama of 3, and said, "Should I take him to the doctor?" And what I learned was that she had access to that question. Like, she had access to being able to go to the doctor with certainty and clarity and get the care she needed for her child, because she was sponsored by someone like you or me. She had access to what she needed. And I thought, that little boy burning with fever, probably needs amoxicillin, but the story could go so different if they don't have access to that, like it does for so many children on this globe. So that's what always sticks with me, is these moments where I realize that just a small sacrifice of mine, what it means for her, what for her story, $38, I can give that up for her to be able to take her baby to the doctor,
Absolutely. That is so overwhelming. Those are beautiful, amazing stories. And I feel like everyone knows that compassion helps children, right? But that may be the limit to what they know. But what that means for their future, like you just said, that she knew and was able to get access, to know that she had access.
Totally.
That's incredible. And that extends for someone's entire life. So yeah, that is incredible. And as you touched on the fact that you were burned out, and I think that's something we hear about a lot in our community. We talk about ministry burnout because it is real. And sometimes it's kind of hard to talk about because it's like, I shouldn't feel this way. I get to work in church. I shouldn't feel this way. I just need to, pray more, read my Bible more, whatever. And like, that's not really always the answer. So what one piece of advice could you maybe give to someone who is listening, who is burned out, or maybe needs to be refreshed and to remember why they're in ministry full time, or even part time, or volunteering if they're fatigued at all in any of those spaces, because that can happen? What would you?
I honestly think we're all fatigued right now.
Yes, amen.
I think we're in a global fatigue, So I think there's a tenderness we need to treat ourselves with right now, currently. There's a recovery that we need to be in as individuals, as a collective, as a community. I went out to dinner with a couple girls the other night, and we just laughed and sat across from a table, and I savored it. I just thought, this is what I was longing for 2 years ago, and I'm in it. So, but I would say, as far as advice, I'd say develop a discerning heart. Listen, cultivate the gifts of this Holy Spirit that are inside of you. God put them there for a purpose. And just know, don't just believe in God. Don't just do God's good work, but know him, walk with him. I know there were many, many months at a time where this isn't a should, because I think when we get into that should space, it's shame sometimes in a disguise. And so, but I do know that when I start my days with abiding in the Lord, whatever that looks like, whether that's, sometimes I go lay in my hammock and I listen to a worship song and I make myself not look at Instagram.
Right.
I can just let those songs soak over me and just allow myself to really remember who God is for me. Just really cultivating that connection with the Lord. I know that sounds so basic, but I am just seeing even now, like if I do that, I fill my cup up, and it may take time to get to a place of real restoration and rest. But I do believe when we seek, and if you're listening and you think, man, I have tried so many times, I don't ever hear God's voice. I have people in my life that is not the way God speaks to them. All I'll say is, when you seek him, you will find him in the unique way that he has designed you to connect with God. Don't try and replicate who God is for your best friend.
Right.
That's not, God has uniquely made us all with different personalities and stories and ways we relate and connect. Look at the way you connect with your friends, what means to you, and then almost look for that. Like, what's your love language with friends and with your spouse, and look for the way God might be meeting you in that way, because he knows how you're loved. And so, just don't tire in your pursuit for connection with him, because, and often that requires Sabbath. And so I think as workers for Jesus, we can just find, we see this at Compassion a lot. We talk about it a lot, that our president and CEO, Jimmy Miato, says, don't let the work of God get in the way of the work of God in you.
Wow.
And so making sure you're tending to the work God wants to do in you, or else what does it matter?
Yes, I could not agree more. I think that was amazing. That was so beautifully said. Going forward, if anyone listening is interested in connecting with you or getting involved in the work of Compassion, what is the best way for them to do that?
I am on Instagram probably more than I should be. So if you want to go to Kristie Christie on Instagram, yes. And I don't even think we mentioned that, but it is my married name. I married just the right man. So I got this double name that, starts conversations every day of my life.
I'm sure it does.
But so it's Kristie and then Christie. And then if you want to sponsor a child, that's where I think this begins. Is, for me, it began with Rohit in India that we sponsored when we were engaged. And we wanted to begin our marriage serving together and doing something with our resources that mattered. And so I heard today it said, if it isn't a sacrifice, it isn't a sacrifice. And I thought that's really good. Like, we need to feel it sometimes. So looking at what it is in my life I can sacrifice to sponsor a child. I've been very real about that. We sponsor 7 kids right now and just really believe in it. And so I would just encourage every person listening to go and find one child that God would call and invite you to sponsor and to take care of and to write letters to and to encourage. Our kids need us. These kids need us more as much as we need them right now. Like, there's a connection that God wants to create with a child that's like nothing else. So I know that you guys have set up a place where we can be able to see how many people listening to this podcast and have been part of the event, that it's compassion.com/SLC. So go there and pray and allow the Lord to show you which child he's inviting you to sponsor. And I think that's where it starts. Who knows? You may work for Compassion one day.
Absolutely. We will be sure to put that link below, along with the ways that you can connect with Kristie. Thank you so much for being on with us today. This was an amazing conversation. It was such a privilege to meet you and talk with you and hear about all of the work that you're doing. Thank you so much, Kristie.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Church Communications Podcast. If you want to learn more, join over 30,000 church leaders in our Facebook group at churchcommunications.com/group. If you liked today's episode, be sure to subscribe and leave a review. It's the most impactful way you can help us reach more church leaders and equip them to better communicate for the church. Finally, don't forget to check out our website at churchcommunications.com. Thanks for listening.